of the inspection is being able to say, have you thought about what you're doing here? Have you thought about the way that this works? Inspecting what it is that you're doing. The Bible talks about inspection, that God is going to inspect us and that our works will prove themselves for the Lord. So that's not anything new, that you shouldn't buckle underneath that. That's part of the process. If you are looking to take somebody on, if you're looking to pass on what your ethical will or your spiritual legacy, you have to be willing to say, these are the things that I've taught you. And this is the way you're going. Do those things match? I mean, I'll tell my kids sometimes, son, do you know better than to do what you're doing? And they'll kind of kick rocks and go, yeah. I said, well, son, if you know better, then do better. You know better. I mean, people are going to come around. And listen, I'm not the only. Is anybody else in the house got dirty dishes? Okay. Now, I'm not talking about dirty dishes in the sink. I'm talking about dirty dishes on the shelf. Okay. Now, I know that this doesn't happen to anybody else, but there are some times where, in an effort to get things done, and we're unloading the dishwasher, because the dishwasher doesn't always work the way it's supposed to, does it? And we're just in a hurry. We just start putting stuff up there, right? Okay. I know Patrick's not in his head, so I know that we're not the only people. And sometimes you go to get that cup later on, and you're like, man, I'm thirsty. And you turn it over, and there's crumblies and stuff on the inside where for some reason or another, you know what I'm talking about. Somebody didn't inspect that cup, right? There wasn't a level of faithfulness. I mean, you turn it over and look. If it's still dirty, then put it back in the sink, man. We'll wash that thing again. It's not a big deal, but there are times where that happens. When I used to work in a kitchen, and we were in the dish room, and somebody's those big commercial dishwashers that take like 30 seconds, and they're just peeling the paint off those dishes, and you slide it through, and then maybe one will flip over, it doesn't get clean, and you take it and say, this didn't get clean, and hand it to the guy. The new guys would get so mad. Well, I washed it. Well, look, no, you set it on there, but it didn't get clean. Okay, it went through the process, but it can't, regardless of whether or not you wash it, there's stuff on it, put it back through. Part of our inspection we have to be willing and open, first of all, to do that spiritually. You have to be willing to look at somebody and say, listen, there's crumblies in your cup. This didn't get clean the way it was supposed to. And if you're going to subject yourself to the Lord, listen, if you're going to subject yourself to the Lord, when someone comes to you and says, there's crumblies in your cup, then you need to look at that cup. Now, I will say this. We don't always like the way that somebody criticizes our cup, do we? Do we? Okay, I don't, and Patrick does it, okay? But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, that cup's dirty. We got to clean it. And that's part of the inspection process. So a good mentor, a good spiritual leader is going to be able to say to somebody, you need to think about what's going on spiritually, and there's some things that you might want to think about cleaning up. And to have the conversation about that helps push them along spiritually.
Whether or not the mentor says things just right.
Sure. How many of you have heard the phrase, when the student is ready, the teacher appears? Right? Okay. Most of the time, the teacher's been there for a while. But the student won't see it. The student won't see it. And there have been lessons all around until that student's ready. And that kind of leads on to the next one. There's an obligation to inform, to give details. And it's interesting that there are some times where in the life of Christ where he'll give details about teaching. So much so that, we really tend to pull those things apart to the letter and maybe to a fault. But there are other times where Jesus is not informing people with words or sermons. He's saying, here's how you do it. Here's how you serve. And he's giving that information just by showing. How many of you have somebody in your life that maybe have never taught you, sat down and said, here's how you do it, but you just watch them live day after day after day, and they have taught you more lessons than you could have ever asked for because of how they live. A good mentor does that, and they don't even have to sign up and say, all right, Amy, today I'm going to be your mentor, and we're going, they just don't. They just do. They're just doing it. And that's part of the information process. Now, sometimes they'll say, here's why we do that. But you have to have that information or share your thoughts and insights. He makes a reference here over to Philippians, if you want to turn over there. Philippians 4 kind of gets it's one of those passages that people tend to just pluck verses out and put them on posters and sell them for $10. And sometimes it's hard to get what everything's doing together. Again, remember, Paul is in prison and he's encouraged them to remain faithful. But he leans on this example, and verse 13 is, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. But verse 9 is, the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace shall be with you. He's saying the things that you have learned and received, right? This is the, hey, come on, let's go do this, and we're doing it together. But also heard and seen. To me, those are two. There are times where Paul will take people and he'll directly coach them and say, this is what's going on, and here's the teaching you need. You can think about the time that he is giving the farewell to the elders at Ephesus, and he'll say, you need to be on your guard, that they're going to be, even among your own flock, that they're going to be people that want to tear the place apart. And you need to be aware of that, and you guard the flock against people that are divisive. You guard against those people. And then there's other times where he'll just take care of it. Where, in Galatians, he said, listen, I had to go and take care of Peter to his face. So there's some times where he's actually doing it, and sometimes he's guarding against it. That same sort of idea here, these things that you've seen in me, this is what you do. And a good mentor will be able to say that on some level, to say these are some things that we've talked about individually, that information that we have shared on a one-on-one basis, and here's some things that you have learned because you've gone out and watched me get my hands dirty and possibly have gotten some dirt on your hands too. Everybody with me? All right. Leads me to the next one, is that to involve. Getting people involved in the work. Why is it important to get people involved? Okay, you get more accomplished. Why else? Okay, it gives you skin in the game, right? It means more to you when you're actually doing it. All right? What else? Okay, yeah, it's great to talk about it, and we'll have it in a book and close it up, but it's all theory until you practice it. Here's what's important to me, and it kind of dovetails into what Alan was saying. Nobody knows how hard or how easy it is until they do it. How many of you have seen somebody doing something, you go, man, that doesn't look hard. And then you go to do it, and you realize, wow, they've really been practicing that. I mean, they do that with ease. And I've got all thumbs when it comes to that. There are some people with their talents and abilities, they can just walk out and just do whatever it is, and they can pick it up, and it's easy to them. And sometimes we think that things are a lot harder than they are, when really, once we get involved, it's not that difficult. Somebody had posted this on, it may have been Cindy, Alan, that posted this on Facebook the other day about that little girl that was holding onto the rope. Anyway, you've probably all seen something like this. A child is in a pool, and they're hanging onto that rope thing that goes across, and they're just screaming, they're going to drown, they're going to drown, they're going to drown. And they just can't turn loose of this. And finally somebody walks up and pushes their legs down to their feet, and they stand up, and the water's like this, just barely up to their waist. And all of a sudden they quit crying and go, oh. How often does that happen to us spiritually? Where it's, man, I don't know if I can preach a sermon. I don't know if I can visit somebody. I don't know if I can write a card. I don't know. Well, it's going to take so long, and what's going to happen? And churches, entire congregations get this mentality where I don't know if we should build another building. I don't know if we should knock stuff down. And all these things go on, and guess what? Put your feet on the ground and stand up. It's not that hard. It's not as hard as you're making it. And that's one reason why you want to get people involved. If you think it's hard, if you think it's so difficult, come on, let's get involved. My calculus teacher would always tell me, if you just quit whining, you've done 90% of the work. How often we do that? Yes, sir, Hugh?
I noticed in that, I think it's, where is it? Top of 95, at the end of the last paragraph, is about choosing the environment.
Yes.
A lot of times the mentor is smart to pick an environment that won't drown. You don't throw them in the deep end.
Yes.
You want to pick something they can handle. Of course you want to push them, but you don't want to put them in a place where they may fail or most likely will.
Yeah.
Where they can actually have some success.
Sure. If you're going to put somebody in a situation where it is difficult, where you know that it's going to be a difficult thing, then give them a place for controlled failure. In other words, okay, let's not take our first sermon out in front of 500 people. Let's get a little class together. We'll get 3 or 4 together and just get kind of used to getting up there and seeing how your notes flow from one to the other. Or let's get you in with somebody who's taught a class before, and kind of go along that way. Or if you're not sure what to say when you go visit with somebody, then go with somebody else. But just to kind of put them in that situation where success will breed success. Somebody knows what they're doing. That makes a big difference, especially if the mentor knows, number one, that it's going to be difficult, or number two, that there is going to be some resistance to that. But at the end of the day, you have to get somebody and you have to grab them sometime and say, come with me. Here's what we're going to do, and I need you to help me. And there have been times where people have grabbed me by the collar and said, come, you're going with me today. And in my mind, I was kicking and screaming the whole way, but it ended up being better for me. So involve people with the work that you're doing and teach them to go along with you. It makes a big difference there. On the part of page 95, that growth environment, he points out John Maxwell's 10 factors that are true of a growth environment. Others are ahead of you. You are continually challenged. Your focus is forward. The atmosphere is affirming. You are often out of your comfort zone. You wake up excited. Failure is not your enemy. Others are growing. People desire change. Growth is modeled and expected. Now, here's what I want to throw at you. When you look at the page 95, don't think that every growth environment has all 10 of these, because likely it does not. And you run down that list and go, well, I tell you what, the atmosphere isn't affirming, so this can't be a growth place. Listen, it's not always affirming when you grow, is it? At some point, you have to tell somebody what they did wrong. At some point, you need to tell somebody else, here's what's not going right. And nobody likes to be told that. But can you imagine what our world would be like if we didn't tell people that what they were doing was wrong? I would not want a surgeon to operate on me who had never been corrected. If it was just always affirming, well, if you want to operate on the heart and start down by the knee, that's, just take that incision and just take it all the way up there. Make sure you have a lot of staples. I don't know that that's what I want. It's not always affirming. Now, I want to say this. That doesn't necessarily give us permission to just berate each other either. I mean, there is a place for you to affirm effort and all that other sort of thing, but the correction's got to be there. And my whole point is just to say this, that when you get involved with sharing your spiritual gifts with somebody, if we're going to talk about grace being the gifts that are given to us and we're sharing those with other people, then there are times where as we get involved, we're going to get frustrated with things. We're going to be turned with things. It's not always going to be easy. We are going to fail. But growth needs to happen. And those are all parts of the process. And it is not your enemy to be criticized. It's not your enemy to fail. It's not your enemy to be challenged. Those things are all good and healthy. And you should look for those things. And if you're not seeing them, then maybe you should seek out a mentor. That's the other side of it. If you look at this list over here on the right and you say to yourself, I don't see some of these things, you may want to try and find somebody who's a mentor. I'm not being challenged. Okay. Somebody that can teach you that you feel like is teaching with you. All right, page 95. Good mentors intercede. Why throw this one in here? As you look at that one, if you haven't seen it yet, as you look at that one, why is it important to have a mentor that will intercede?
In the deep end, and they start drowning, you know, well, maybe they'll figure it out. So they drown and die, you've done a terrible job, you know what I mean? You got to reach in and grab, let them know that you're going to be there to help them, but not necessarily do it for them.
Right.
You can't swim for them, but I'll help you if you need that.
Right. There's an intercession, first of all, with the dangers that are there. That if for some reason the person that you're working with is in over their head, right? Because frankly, as mentors, sometimes we do that. We have an expectation that something's going to turn out right, and then it doesn't. And then you go, ugh, I didn't mean for that to happen that way. And so you've got to pull them out. You've got to intercede in that regard. Yeah, and you've got to protect them if you can. Go ahead, Hugh.
I don't know what he's getting at here, but it sounds like he's getting at people that intercede that are negative mentors. Like they decide, oh, it's time for me to jump in and straighten this guy out because he's messing up so much, and only tell him how much he's done wrong, and never give him any positive. There are a lot of people that want to say negative things all the time.
That's right. And so imagine, let's go back to a Bible class or a teaching space, and all the feedback was negative. Like if somebody's just taking it negative over and over and over again, there's got to be a place where a mentor says, hold on. Let me be a shield for that person for a minute and say, here's maybe you don't know what all is going on in this situation, or he's never done it before, or whatever, and kind of help protect that. That's an important part of intercession, not just to protect from being in over his head with material or what's going on, but to also say, listen, maybe you don't realize what's going on in the background here. And it's interesting what happens when we find out with people what's going on in the background. So it's not just the protection from the environments when it becomes overwhelming, where you're protecting, where you're turning to the student and helping. There are times as a mentor where you intercede and come in between them. Sometimes if you've got a couple people, if you've ever, you do this with your kids or with other people's kids even, whether it's scouts or football or whatever, or if there are people together that can argue, they'll argue. And sometimes the intercession is, stop it. This isn't what we're about. We need to stop and take a break and come back together. A good mentor recognizes ultimately, and this is what his point is, I think, ultimately recognizes when the strain is too much for the student and says, okay, we've got to protect this somehow, because if not, we're going to squelch it. And that's an important aspect for it. And so he talks about there with Peter, he gives the example where the Pharisees were going after him and they were questioning about the tax, and he had to stop and take care of that on both sides. The other part down in number 4, or the 4th paragraph underneath there, praying for your student is another part of a mentor's routine. These prayers may be scheduled at first, and over time a mentor's love and concern for his or her students should make praying for them a natural and ongoing process. There are going to be times where, as you get involved in the lives of other people, where you just call them. Like I have mentors that just call me. And they have taught me by doing that there are people that I need to just call and just say, hey, you know what? It's Tuesday. You were on my mind. I wanted to call and check and see how you're doing. And give them a chance to talk about some things. And when you do that, it's amazing that the times that you'll catch somebody just going, ugh, well, I just got off the phone with this happening, and they need that guidance. And there's some times where, they just need that friendly touch. How are you doing? Hey, things are going great, and thanks for calling. But part of that concern and prayer is just remembering them to the Lord and letting them know, hey, listen, I know that life is difficult for you. I know you're going through this challenge, but I'm here to go walk through it with you. Younger Christians especially, I don't even say it that way. People that haven't been through the experiences that you've been through need your guidance to go through them. I think that's a better way to say it. It's because I don't want this to constantly be, we've got somebody that's older and younger. Mentors could be peers, if that makes sense. Yeah, exactly. Mentors can very easily be people of the same group and same age, and be going through. One of them went through a significant event, and now the other person's going through it, and he goes, let me help you how I walk through that, and I'll definitely pray for you about this and this and such. And that makes a difference as well. And I think a lot of times when we think mentor, we think older and younger. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It may be just time difference between experiences. Yes, sir, Hugh?
The other side is where I forget what it was, which point it was, maybe an instructor informed that if you've had an experience like he's going through or she's going through, to share that, to know that you've been through it. You don't need to hold that back and not be, vulnerable.
Sure.
And let them know you have gone through exactly what they're going through in the past, and this is how I handled it.
Right.
That helps a lot for them to know I'm not alone.
Yeah, it does. It makes a big difference. And that really kind of breathes into the last one on the bottom of page 95. He talks about inspiring. All right? Now, I've mentioned this before. To me, this was a big revelation for me. I share it with people when I can. I think there's a big difference between inspiration and motivation. I think learning the difference between inspiration and motivation is key. I'm not saying that they don't overlap, because I think that they do. But what does inspire mean? I'll give you a hint. Okay, we often talk about the passages. All Scripture is inspired by God, and the phrase that comes after that means God breathed it. Okay, He breathed it. When I say that I've been inspired, what does that mean?
We take a lot of benchmark tests, and I tell them, I'll bribe you to do good. And I get the awards for improving. But over the course of the year, I think it goes from motivating to inspiring. They don't care much about the reward as much as them growing.
Right.
They're inspired to continue to do better, even if they don't get their coach, don't get too much of that, because they're trying to do better each time for themselves.
Yeah.
So they're not being outwardly motivated, they're inwardly inspired.
Well, and they're inspired because you put that in them.
Yeah.
Okay? Inspiration, when we talk about Scripture being inspired, it's God breathed. God breathed it God breathed it out. Okay? And we talk about inspiration, that's God's breath to us. All right? Motivation has the idea of a motor. That's kind of internal. Okay? You have your people say, I need some motivation. That's on you. Okay? Inspiration is what you see all around you. And you could see somebody, a mentor, saying, here's how you live your life. Or you could see that example and you go, man, that's just inspiring. You find an artist that sees a sunset, they go, man, that breathes life into me. And so now, because of that, my motor starts and I'm going to start painting it. And that's the idea, I think, of a mentor, is that there's this inspiration where because of the things that you speak, because of how you act, because of your connection with the Lord, it is inspiring. And then, as a result, it motivates the people that are going to move. But that motivation comes from within them. The inspiration comes from you. Do you see the difference? And some of you may want to say, well, those are awfully close, and this could be that. And that's fine. Go buy me coffee sometime. We'll talk about it. But that's my way of illustrating the point of how you play a role. They will be motivated by the way that you inspire them. Okay? So inspire them. Breathe into them.
That the motivation comes from the inspiration.
Yes. Yeah. They're directly linked.
Giving people a sense of what can be. To me, that's inspiration.
Yes. Yeah. That this can happen. And now I'm willing to take the next step for what can happen. Giving them a sense of vision or completeness or giving them a sense of direction. I mean, those are all ways to inspire people. And that's important. That's important for us to pick up on. Hugh, did you have your hand up a minute ago?
I was looking down here at the last part of the 95, the gates of hell will not overpower it. And then I looked at one of his, and it says, others are growing on his list. If you're in and this is I hope this is not the last thing to talk about, but if you're in a situation where it's stagnant, where nobody else is growing, it's really hard to get your stuff going.
It is. When the inspiration isn't there, when you don't see it. And that can sometimes be a cycle where I have to be motivated to see the inspiration, and so you can kind of get stuck. But good mentors see that. And that's important. And one of the things I want you guys to understand is good mentors can see when other people are stuck. And sometimes it means that we have to ourselves go find some way to help them. Or there's times where you can nudge somebody else that may be a little bit better at it to go and help them. And certainly, the Bible, Paul sends other people to refresh, other ministers to go and refresh the people that he's met before. And he'll say, you know their works, you know what they do, and they've come and they've told me about this and such that's happened, and we're excited about the things that are going on there. That's got to happen. There are times where we just can't get to everybody, and that inspiration to let someone know that they're useful and that they have a place is important. We haven't done a lot of questions in this book, but I do want you to get over on page 96. There are a couple of them that, for me, I wanted to talk about.
Okay. Yes, I agree with what you said. About more benefits. But this, I didn't think, I was at a congregation one time, and they made this man, or I think it was a deacon, calling him a deacon. But this other member of the church said, well, maybe that'll help him to attend services more. But I think he should have been attending services more and had that influence out there than to make him a deacon. I don't think that would work in a situation like that. Put him out there. Yeah, you see what I'm trying to say? He should already be there. They're going to make him a deacon.
Let me try and pull that over. It seems as though the solution, that person needed a mentor first. Is that what you're getting at?
Services regularly, and he said, well, we're going to make him, they'd already made him a deacon, okay. But this member said, well, maybe he'll come more often now. I think that's putting the cart before the horse.
It is.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it is. And good mentors will stop that. Good mentors will see that issue before it gets going. They'll find a way to say, you know what, before we appoint someone to do this sort of thing, it's like we were saying earlier, they must first be tested. There has to be, we talked about on page page 94, inspecting what's going on. And
And I mean, the congregation knew that he wasn't coming very good. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
They had already been there. Well, where were they? What were they thinking? Just go ahead and then think, well, maybe he'll come to work tonight.
right. And what I'm saying is that situation needed a mentor to get with him rather than talk around and say, well, maybe this will happen more. No, somebody needs to get in that man's life and get with him before they appoint him. You're right. And they need to have that conversation and inspect his work. And they weren't doing that. Just, well, here's a young man that has kids, and we're going to bring him on and make him a deacon. That has to happen before. All this other stuff was lacking. And then you've got a problem where now you've got somebody that's not going to be the right person to be there. Absolutely. Well, they're opening the door, so we'll go ahead and close this down and move on next Wednesday to lesson 20.